There is the expectation that American companies would return to the Russian market in the second half of 2025.
Well, the president of Russia commented upon this situation. He said that we have nothing against American company, but those companies who decided to leave their business in Russia might find that their place has been occupied already by Russian or other foreign investors. And in this case, we would not make any decisions which would discriminate those who came to invest in Russia instead of Americans. If American companies would like to come to a place which is not yet occupied, if they want to propose a project, a new project, on top of the previous business ties, of course we will look into this, and if we find balance of our interests, I think it would be only natural to get into business together.
Well, what areas has the U.S. offered to lift sanctions on? Because it wouldn't be possible for many American companies to enter the Russian market right now under the existing sanctions.
It is up to them to decide.
So no offer has been made?
How can we offer something in a situation
United States to Russia?
Well, the United States clearly tells us that they are interested in doing business together. We never reject business proposals provided they're based on the equal opportunities and treatment of each other and lead to a balance of interest. Specific proposals which are being mentioned in the media, I cannot comment upon. This is not serious. We are not we are not acting like the people in Kyiv who talk to the world through the media, including talking to presidents of great countries.
So if I understand you correctly, you neither fear sanctions nor want them lifted.
Look, you quoted my statement, and
yes.
You quoted it right. That's my position.
Okay, so when President Trump threatens new sanctions, that's not of concern.
You're asking this for the third time.
Yes.
This was a brief answer. This was a brief answer, by the way.
You are being brief and direct on that part. I was asking on the sanctions for clarity and directness. Broadly speaking, when you look at what's happening in the battle space in Ukraine right now, analysts say about 18% of Ukrainian territory is under the control of Russian forces. U.S. intelligence says battlefield trends are in Russia's favor. So if that's the case, why should the U.S. believe Russia is serious about ending the war if everything is in your favor?
Well, we judge by the reaction of our American colleagues to what we tell them. And this is being done during negotiations. They're confidential as any serious negotiation. And they know our position, and as I quoted Marco Rubio, he publicly said that they better understand the Russian position and the reasons for what is going on. And he said that nobody in Washington lifted a finger to do the same, to try to understand Russia during the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. And this implies that the dialogue continues, that the dialogue is supported by the United States, and I reiterate that it is supported by the Russian Federation, and this dialogue continues.
So President Trump said he expects to meet soon with Vladimir Putin. What's an acceptable time and location? Why should they meet?
Look, the presidents are masters of their own destiny and of their own schedule. I heard President Trump say that he is planning to be somewhere mid-May, and that after that he would be suggesting some dates. I cannot add anything else.
Right. He said he was asked about meeting with Vladimir Putin, specifically in Saudi Arabia, and he said most likely not. That's in mid-May. but shortly thereafter.
You said the same thing as I.
Right.
So
Well,
we
what are
read,
you planning?
So we read the same newspapers and watch the same channels on TV.
Right, but I can't pick up the phone and call Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, like you can. What plans are you making for the two to meet?
Okay, let's try to
Look,
scout some areas possible.
I hope your listeners understand very well that it is not ethical for a foreign minister to prejudge, to presume what presidents might or might not discuss.
But you think it would be good for the two leaders to meet soon? Do you expect
that's
what Envoy Witkoff is negotiating?
We're always in favor of meeting with people who are ready for a dialogue. President Putin repeated this thousands of times, and when we met in Riyadh together with President Putin's foreign policy advisor Ushakov, with Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz, the American colleagues clearly stated that the US policy is based firmly on US national interests. They understand that the Russian policy, led by President Putin, is also based on Russian national interests, and that it is the responsibility of great powers to make sure that whenever those national interests do not coincide, and this is in most of the cases, this difference should not be allowed to degenerate into confrontation. And that's what dialogue is for. But they also added that when the national interests of two countries or of more countries coincide, it would be stupid to miss an opportunity to translate this coincidence into some material, mutually beneficial projects. And this is absolutely our position.
You know that President Trump is coming up on 100 days in office, and he has made clear his patience is wearing thin with the diplomacy here. Do you expect the U.S. and Russia to continue to talk after these potential peace talks fall apart? I mean, is the rebuilding of the relationship so significant now that you think it could withstand the peace talks in Ukraine falling apart?
First, Russia is always available for a dialogue, so you have to address the question to the American side. Second, you prejudge the current process by saying that eventual collapse of the talks. We concentrate on doing business, not on thinking, failures or victories about anything. Unless you concentrate on the facts, that's what we do. You cannot be serious about what you are doing.
Well, President Trump and Secretary Rubio said that the window was closing, that time is running out here. That's not my opinion. That's what they said.
Look,
I want to ask you a little.
No,
go ahead. Sorry.
Wait a second. I just quoted Marco Rubio, who yesterday said about better understanding of the Russian position. So maybe you missed that.
Well, he also said a decision in days needed to be made, and that the U.S. has other things to focus on.
No, we understand the impatience, because in the American culture, you create expectations, and you ignite tension around those expectations. This does not help to do real politics. But in our case, as I said, we are always ready for dialogue, ready for negotiations, and we would not, begin by banking on a failure. This would be a characteristic of bad deal makers, inexperienced deal makers.
Mm-hmm. Others in the Russian government have proposed that the U.S. and Russia could work together in the Arctic. Are there specific areas of discussion for cooperating right now?
You always want me to disclose things.
Well, this is a public statement.
Things which might be discussed by respective officials of Russia and the United States, by those who are responsible for trade, economic cooperation, investments, and so on and so forth. How do you expect a participant of negotiations which are still to reach some kind of specific understanding to disclose details in public? It is not serious.
I'm just
I
asking what you think the potential is.
I read President Trump's book, The Art to Make a Deal, and he doesn't advise to disclose information before it's time.
Respectfully, President Trump speaks quite a lot about the things he would like to do with Russia and opportunities to work together. I understand you don't want to. On the specific things President Trump has said in public, one of the things he brought up is that the U.S. could work with Ukraine to operate the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, which is in an area, Zaporizhzhia. Russians control that area right now. Do you agree with President Trump's public statements that the best security would be for the U.S. and Ukraine to operate that together?
No, we never received such an offer. And if we do, we would explain that the power station, Zaporozhye nuclear power station, is run by the Russian Federation state corporation called Rosatom. It is being under monitoring of the IAEA personnel permanently located on the site. And if not for the Ukrainian regular attempts to attack the station and to create a nuclear disaster for Europe and for Ukraine as well, the safety requirements are fully implemented, and it is in very good hands.
So that's a no.
No, I don't think any change is conceivable.
Okay, because that was in a public statement from the White House to the media.
We as I said, we did not receive any proposal which would be specific. So, I understand that journalists have to speculate. We cannot speculate on something which is really not being mentioned during the negotiations.
Zaporizhzhia is not being negotiated right now.
Shall I say that for the third time? You wanted me to be
I'm trying
brief.
to
You wanted
reconcile
me to be
public
brief.
statements. But I heard you, but I just want to be abundantly clear, because that is also widely reported to be in the U.S. proposal currently on the table.
Why don't you ask me about President Trump's position on Crimea?
You liked what President Trump said about Crimea yesterday when he said that it had been under Russian control since 2014?
It's not about liking or disliking. It's about the fact that he said the truth. And when
so he said something specific you liked.
When Zelensky said that this is absolutely excluded because Crimea is part of Ukraine according to the constitution, nobody in Europe or in the States, by the way, reminded him that apart from territorial issues, the Ukrainian constitution guarantees, I quote, the free development, the use and protection of the Russian and other national minorities' language in Ukraine. And they guarantee the development of ethnic, cultural, language and religious identity of all peoples and national minorities in Ukraine. This is also in the Constitution, but as I mentioned already, and you decided not to go deeper into this topic, nobody in the West even mentions human rights when they demand that Ukraine defeat Russia in the battlefield.
President Trump said Crimea is not even being discussed right now.
Yes, because this is a done deal.
You mean Russia occupies and controls and will not negotiate the future of Crimea? Is that what you're saying?
Russia do not negotiate its own territory.
Our sensors are indicating large
And,
So that's one,
President Trump
one
understands this.
specific thing that you do want in the public space. You said everything else that I've asked you about in the U.S. proposal is too sensitive to discuss. Is there any other part of the U.S. proposal that you do like?
No. I only commented what was said publicly. And I also said that normal negotiators, I emphasize this once again, normal negotiators do not negotiate through a microphone. They meet and they discuss, they listen to each other, they try to understand, they try to see where a balance of interest can be reached, and this is how our contacts with the American representatives are organized.
Respectfully, you've been in the top levels of Russian diplomacy for 30 years.
For how many?
This isn't for at least 30 years. I mean, you've been in very key diplomatic roles within the top of the Russian diplomatic system for a very, very long time. I don't think any part of this is typical or normal, to use the word you used. Steve Witkoff is the envoy. Kirill Dmitriev is Vladimir Putin's envoy here. Do you think it's unfortunate that the international system of diplomacy isn't being used more and that it's this kind of one-on-one personal envoy structure?
You did not express your disappointment that the international system of diplomacy was not used for the entire duration of the Biden administration.
No, I was asking whether you were disappointed.
You did not mention that Europeans are really very nervous that they are being marginalized. But I can quote a lot of what Europeans stated. I mentioned already Kaja Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen, who said any deal must make sure that Ukraine is stronger and that Ukraine is on top of Russia. Look, do you need negotiators who believe in this kind of logic and who don't want to look for honest balance of interest? The Trump administration is interested in searching for a balance of interest. They sincerely want to understand better the Russian position, and they're getting this understanding. And we understand better the American position through negotiations and meetings and discussions which we have with them.
Back in January, Russia signed a deal with Iran to become a strategic partner. Would Russia be willing to sever that relationship at the request of the U.S. if it meant better relations with America?
There was never any request like this, and we welcome the process which was initiated between the United States and Iran. We are ready to be helpful if parties believe this can be the case, and they know this.
You were the negotiator back in 2015 on behalf of Russia for that landmark international agreement, the JCPOA. And part of how Russia was helpful was destroying Iran's enriched nuclear material. Is that an offer you would do again?
We were not involved in destroying Iran's nuclear material.
Disposing.
The part of the deal was to move some amount of this material to Russia for keeping.
Okay, so not destroying but keeping. Would you keep Iran's enriched nuclear material that they've made in the past few years? Is that an offer to the U.S.?
We are not putting our nose in the negotiations between two countries, one of which is not Russia. And I said very clearly, I believe, but you wanted a brief answer, I will have to be longer, since it is not probably getting through. We welcome the dialogue between the US and Iran. We would be certainly ready to help if both parties believe this is going to be useful, and they know that we are ready.
Mm-hmm. Well, back then there were sanctions and pressure at the UN. It's a very different dynamic now. I want to ask you quickly about nuclear weapons because Russia is such a nuclear powerhouse. According to US intelligence, Russia is developing a new satellite meant to carry a nuclear weapon, which would knock out other satellites and devastate the US if it's used. That's in publicly published material. Does Russia intend to violate past treaties and actually put a nuclear weapon in space?
Well, before asking this question, you have to check whether this is true or not. What your military...
This is what U.S. intelligence says.
U.S. intelligence, I was listening to President Trump about his views of what is the list of achievements of U.S. intelligence, and I have my own facts on which I rely. We have been promoting for many years in the United Nations a resolution prohibiting putting any nuclear weapons into outer space. The country which is categorically against it is the United States. At the same time, the United States promotes an approach according to which they want to prohibit putting conventional weapons in outer space. And they cannot answer the question, does this mean that nuclear weapons, they would be planning to move to the orbit? So my answer is very clear. We have been championing in the United Nations a legal prohibition of placing any nuclear weapons in outer space. And the United States, at least during the Biden administration, this was the case. They were categorically against it.
It was the Trump administration's intelligence community that published those findings just a few weeks ago. Are you saying the Trump administration's intelligence community findings are incorrect in regard to Russia developing a new satellite meant to carry a nuclear weapon?
We denied those allegations. We, once again, cannot help repeating, have been promoting for years in the United Nations a treaty, not a declaration, a treaty prohibiting placing weapons in outer space. And the United States is against it. I cannot comment about the validity of the intelligence reports, as I told you. We never received any facts which would confirm the allegations.
Do you have any interest in arms control talks with the United States, with the Trump administration?
It was the United States which broke the process of strengthening strategic stability, and as if the United States is willing to get back to this track, we would see what are the conditions under which this might be possible. As long as in the U.S. doctrinal documents, we are described as adversary, when the officials in Washington some time ago called us enemy. So we want to understand what Washington thinks of our relationship and whether Washington is ready for, I would emphasize once again, an equal, mutually respectful dialogue heading to finding a balance of interest. If this is the approach, everything is possible.
Minister, we are coming up on time, but just before I let you go, from everything you laid out, I haven't heard from you that Russia is willing to make any concession on anything to date.
No, my brief answer is you are wrong. I have been.
Russia
wait a second, please. I have been emphasizing repeatedly in relation to Ukraine, in relation to strategic relations with the United States, I have been emphasizing our readiness to seek balance of interests. If this is not what your station considers readiness for negotiations, then I don't know how to be even